All right, now this is our first official guest on Pints and Politics.
Yes, sir.
And it is Speaker Murrell Smith. And before we even allow him to speak, I want to kind of share my experience as a freshman, because I came in thinking that leadership is going to be the swamp.
Oh, this big swamp, man,
Yeah.
and we were just going in to clean it all up,
Right. But the difference was whenever, and I missed orientation, I missed everything, but I came in with this perception that, certain people that I was listening to, everything that they said was true, and whenever I came in, I'm thinking, okay, we're going to see how swampy this is, and I'm going to stay quiet, and I'm going to watch things. What I will say, Mr. Speaker, since I've come in, and coming in having a doubting attitude towards you, you've never lied to me. You've always told me the truth whenever I asked you. You've never steered me wrong, and I've never felt like I've been left in the dark. So for that, I want to say thank you. In addition, I also want to say, as the candidate that people said I was more of a libertarian than a Republican whenever I ran, I was too far right. This has been the most conservative class in the history of 250 years of South Carolina, and that is thanks to not only your leadership, but
the team you put in place.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I want to sincerely thank you for that.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you, and I want to correct you on one thing. You weren't hesitant to speak up, so that it was not true, Brandon.
No one's ever accused me.
Y'all remember, I met with all of you individually as freshmen, asked you to come into my office, and we spent time, and I found someone more blunt than I was, Brandon. And I'll never forget, you walked out there, and Patrick Dennis, my chief of staff, told me, he said, "That's a no bullshit guy right there." And I agree. So it's a pleasure to serve with you all. It's a pleasure to be your first guest on a podcast. And so I want to likewise speak highly of both of you. You guys have been two conscientious freshmen who have really worked to make a difference in South Carolina. And what I appreciate really about how your attitude is there's people who are here to come and make noise and make points, and there's people here who are come to make differences. And I will, in all sincerity, say this, and I'll tell anybody this, well, I'm saying it now live on a podcast, but you guys have come and tried to make a difference. And I've never seen Heath. I am very appreciative of your diligence in trying to learn issues and trying to find solutions to our challenges.
Right.
And, Brandon, you have done a good job of shepherding. You've gotten some big wins, unfortunately, because of some personal tragedies. But you have turned those into positives, and you have made a difference in South Carolina. And so I want to thank you for that. So, I wish we had a freshman class of 29 people. I wish we had 27 others like y'all. We would have been a lot more successful in some of the things, and we had some disappointments right at the end from some chicanery that we saw that go on in our body. But nonetheless, I think when we end this legislative session, we got a couple more things we got left to do with some conference committees. But I'm going to tell you, I've served. It's my 24th year in here, so completing my 12th term. And I will tell you, this has probably been the most successful legislative session that I've ever been a part of. And it's because we get like-minded people together who want to move South Carolina forward and do things that matter to the citizens of the state. And so we ought to be proud of the work we've done this session.
Mr. Speaker, when you handed out the agenda of what you wanted to get done in the first session,
It was like, ain't no way.
we both said, this is too aggressive, it's too bold.
This is what the swamp tells you.
Hey, listen, Guppy and I were like, check. We were all about it,
Yeah.
but I was like, there's no way. There's no way we're going to get it done. And some of the things we fell short on, but that wasn't without any effort on our caucus's part. But, that's government. You're not going to get 10 out of 10 every year.
I didn't think we would get a quarter of what was
Correct.
written on that piece of paper initially done. And, I mean... And truthfully, that's what makes you want to follow someone into battle is whenever they shoot for the stars, and we surpass the moon, and that is that is what we need, is to have these aggressive agendas and to be able to deliver and to be able to go back home, and regardless of the narrative that is put back home, and to say, you're wrong, and to be able to fight and look, here's the facts. And the one thing that you often say is that the adults are here to govern. And you know me with my attitude, I get a little emotional sometimes, and I get calmed down because it's like, hey, you're here to govern, not to play these games. And that I'm appreciative of.
Yeah, and you know, and that's the problem. And I talked about this in my wrap-up session with the press after just a couple of minutes ago about why we're here. We're here to make a difference in South Carolina. And we have an institution that has been with us for about 250 years. And that institution has done some great things. They've done some bad things. But, you know, at the end of the day, it was filled with people with one common goal, and that goal was to make South Carolina better. And so, you know, I think you're right when you go out and, you know, social media is not very kind to us at times. No. And, you know, if you worry about social media and that's your world, then don't go into politics, I would say. But, you know, my job is not to worry about what the social media says. My job is to worry about what my constituents and the citizens of South Carolina say. So, you know, it's interesting you talk about, we go into these forums, and I go back to my Republican Party, and, you know, they spend some time on social media, and they come back and say, why did you do this or do that? And the knives are out. But once you explain why we did this, like, you know, I know they put me on there saying I killed what was it yesterday that I killed? The help, was it? I can't even remember what it was.
Was it the help not harm stuff?
No, yeah, it was ruling something out of order on the budget, and, you know, it went up on Twitter. But, you know, my job is not to create a political agenda over there, Speaker. My job is to rule with what the institution and the rules are, and, you know, and whatever that issue is, I'm forgetting right now what it is. I can pull out my Twitter and find out quickly. But you know, the one issue is, it had nothing to do about the issue. It had to do that we're talking about a budget and what is germane under the budget.
Right.
And I am going to rule, I'm a purist in that regard. Whether I support the issue or I am opposed to the issue, I'm going to rule what's right, because you got to think about it. In all sincerity, I am the 61st Speaker of the House of the South Carolina House of Representatives. 60 people have preceded me. And that's you think about in the history of the state, one of the oldest states in the Union, is that there's not been a lot of us, and so my job is to advance a political agenda that we come up with as a Republican caucus. But more importantly, my job is to lead the House, whether Republican, Democrats, or whatever other party that they pledge allegiance to. My job is to protect that institution and make sure I leave it better than I found it. And so, you know, you sometimes got to remember that awesome responsibility that has been given to me, and I appreciate you guys entrusting me to be your leader this past session. And I think, you know, I hope we got a lot more years ahead of us, but we need to remember that you know, we've got to make sure that we better the lives of the citizens of this state, and the only way you do that is by working together, finding issues that you agree upon, and don't demand purity or don't demand complete wins, because, you know, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get perfection. And I always say this: perfect is the enemy of good.
Yeah.
I was so sad I couldn't bring my soapbox with me to the State House.
So, Mr. Speaker, you know, I've heard you tell some old war stories about your times as a freshman member, you know, about how you used to give them hell every now and again. And now you're leadership, right? You are the boss. You know, you're directing the strategy of what we want to accomplish. How has the speakership changed your perspective of that chamber and of that body?
Well, you grow into the position, and y'all know this as freshmen. I mean, there's fun to be had, there's camaraderie, and you miss going back to being the freshman, because being a freshman, when you really, you know,
footloose, fancy free, you know.
You're right, and you're in that way, and you go do what you want. But, you know, what's important about it is you form relationships, and politics is about relationships. You know, if you don't trust me, then you're not going to choose me to be the speaker, or you're not going to listen to me when I get at the well and make representations about what's in this bill. So the one thing you got to do is form relationships, and with that relationship, form trust into one another. And that's something that unfortunately I'm seeing now, that people are leaving, checking at the door, and there's a bigger goal than to create relationships and create trust. In fact, there's a lot of people who say, we're not here to go along and get along. We're not here to make friends. We're here to burn the place down. And so that's not the way you do that. But when, I've come from where I was Mark Sanford, Governor Sanford was not a well-respected governor in the General Assembly. And I never forget that I was one of his taxpayer heroes, because I voted to sustain a lot of the budget vetoes, and much to the chagrin of our leadership over there, who gave me a lot of grief about it. But you learn and you mature in the role as you grow as a legislator, and you understand that your job is not to say, how am I going to make sure I get reelected in the next election? How am I going to better South Carolina? And that's what I've really found now is kind of, and I wouldn't say I'm not concerned about being reelected, but I think I've earned the trust of the citizens of Sumter County from my years of service, and I've got a wonderful community that I love dearly, that really has trust in me, and I appreciate allowing to represent them. And it's kind of a relief to say, I'm at the end of my political career. So if I serve 2 more years and that's all I serve, then it's been a great ride. And so I'm not going to let politics or personal political issues get in the way of me trying to do what's right. And so, you learn all that grief I would give to David Wilkins when he was there, or Bobby Harrell, I understand now the herding of cats mentality, how you got to satisfy people. And
especially on Sine Die Thursday.
Yes. And so it is interesting, but it's an honor to serve the citizens of this state in that capacity, and it's an honor to serve the citizens of Sumter County.
It is. It's a great opportunity, right, to find those solutions.
Yeah, whenever I came in, I had my personal issue, and I learned very early on that my bull in a china shop approach, my bluntness, I do lack a filter at times, could hurt me. And luckily I had the men of the porch caucus that we call ourselves, that would sit around and solve the world's problems on the back porch, to kind of keep me in check at times. But I learned...
I don't know if that was a positive influence. The jury's still out on that.
But I do think whenever I came in, I made a few comments, and essentially my approach was, I don't care what you think, this is what I'm going to do. And whenever I took that approach, I was also being disrespectful to the men who were, for the first time, running a committee. And
or
for the first time, the first time running a subcommittee.
So we skipped that step in the fentanyl.
I skipped it, and then all of a sudden I learned, you need to go and talk to this person. And whenever I went and talked to that person, I found out they're on the same page with me. However, this is their first time in a leadership position, and here comes this rogue freshman thinking I'm going to do whatever I want to do, and to hell with what you think.
Yeah.
And I learned that if I could just have the conversation, regardless of whether I agree or disagree with you, then we can come to a common solution many times.
Yeah, and there's no doubt about that. And what you learn is having a personal conversation. Whatever your preconceived notions of who this person is or how they're going to be, when you talk to them, you can figure out, you can find common ground and get things done.
Right.
And there's a segment of in politics right now, and it's at every level of government, where people don't want to have conversations. They don't want to work through things. They want to demand, and if they don't get it, they want to throw temper tantrums.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work as a child.
They want to take hostages.
Yeah, and it doesn't work in politics. And I always tell people, I spoke to a government class at Wofford College, my alma mater,
How about them
week.
Dogs?
Yeah, the T-Dogs. And and I told them, I said, guys, you're the next generation coming through. So you can follow this model that, who screams loudest is right, or, who's the most obnoxious gets the attention. But at the end of the day, in your personal relationships, you're not going to have friends if you act like that. And you're not going to have a family if you act like that. But it's not okay to act like that in politics, because it's not going to make you successful. And I call it the human bomb threat, bomb scare. is, when you can see when certain people in our body take the whole chamber empties. And Skipper Perry used to say about one representative I will leave unnamed is that he was a human bomb threat. Someone would call it the whole chamber clears out when he takes a podium. And there are people that do that, and then you notice the people who take the floor and the chamber quiets down and people get in the seat and they listen. And which one do you want to strive to be? And that's always the way I leave it with people. And guys, y'all see that and it, and you've learned that all your preconceived notions of how the process works, the best thing to do is observe it, watch what works, watch what the body wants, and play to the desire of the body.
I mean, I'm a smoker, so as soon as certain people step up to the well, I go out for a cigarette break.
Unless the speaker orders the chamber locked and...
I freaked out during that.
How are you going to smoke?
I wrote a letter. It said the speaker had to sign off on it. Then you walked away from the well.
He said,
so
pretty
I went up
please.
and gave it to Charles. I was like, please, can I go get a cigarette while we're trying to track down these people?
I will give you a little bit of advice now. You can ask to go, if you read the rule, you can't leave the second floor. So technically you would be on the second floor, so I could have allowed you to go outside and smoke cigarettes.
But I couldn't find you to ask.
I was hiding. I didn't want to listen to that bill be read.
I gave Charles the note card that I wrote it on. I was like, look, you can keep this for your scrapbook.
So just to put it in perspective for your listening audience,
for our two listeners,
for your two listeners, your two parents.
No, my mama won't listen because we're drinking.
Yeah, that's like my mother. But so yesterday we invoked an archaic rule that is rarely used. So one member who wanted to create a disruption to the body decided to request a 200-plus page bill to be read by the reading clerk. And so they started that, and so other members said, and you looked at, the rule requires a member that makes that request has to sit in their seat. So that person was sitting in the seat, and then apparently the rest of the colleagues of that person moved on outside and decided they didn't want to join, and so...
Or working on campaigns in the back room.
Working on campaigns in the back room or barking out orders. So
he's not lying.
Representative Bamberg moved to invoke Rule 3.9, which means that when you vote 3.9, all members are to be in the chamber. The outer doors of the chamber are to be shut, and then we are there to do the business. And unfortunately, the business was listening to the reading clerk read 200 pages of a bill. And so unfortunately for this member, some of the best friends had left the chamber and had some illnesses. And so when this happens, if you're not in the chamber, then the highway patrol is to go and retrieve you and bring you to the chamber, and you must reimburse the highway patrol for the cost of bringing you back into the chamber.
Oh.
So this really got, and unfortunately, these people who had legitimate reasons not to be there, they were ill, but they didn't obtain leave, were blowing my phone up as we're going through this and say, I can't come, but it's not up to me to say, to give you,
that's the rules.
I cannot give you a pass. The rules were invoked. We got to abide by the rules as an equitable.
And it was your colleague, right?
Yes.
It was a Freedom Caucus member who called this BS rule for Bubba to read.
I don't know. I was just mad that Bamberg invoked that after he went and huffed down a cigarette and didn't let me know.
It didn't give you the heads up.
I wasn't paying attention to anything. It's like, damn you, I'm nicking. I can't go outside.
So my recommendation to you is to always keep some Nicorette gum in your desk.
I was finding the pages, which ones were 21 that I could send out to go get me a can of dip if I needed to.
Yeah. So that'll make sure if that's ever invoked again, you will at least be sane.
Yeah, that's right.
You won't be jonesing. So
what about, Mr. Speaker, this year, like we've talked about it, we made a lot of conservative progress. What are some of the ones that you just really, the keys are like, all right, that's a win, that's a win, that's a win?
Well, I mean,
makes you most proud.
Yeah, I mean, I think first thing we got to do is concentrate on creating jobs for South Carolinians. And I'm not just talking about any job. I'm talking about good paying jobs.
Right.
And so, we did some marvelous work in economic development, workforce development, things to that effect this last year and carrying on into this year. And, I'm proud to be a part of it. I've really involved myself in economic development. I will meet with any prospect that comes over here. I've met with companies all over the world who are looking at South Carolina, and I can tell you South Carolina is a hot place right now to locate. And we've got to take care of some of our own problems, but we're going to get there, and we'll be able to get that straight.
Can we make it just like anyone but Northerners, though?
If you notice what I'm saying, is I'm saying creating jobs for South Carolinians. I have long ago learned when I go up to Greenville and I go to Charleston, and I mentioned about creating jobs, I'm quickly reminded we don't need any more jobs because we can't fill them here, and so we're bringing people into our state, and you're overcrowding us. Yeah. And I'm like, well, that's a good problem to have, but I understand. So I do think that. But Heath, and that's one of the issues that you and I first talked about when we met was certificate of need. Mm-hmm. And I know everyone thought, oh, we're never going to pass certificate of need, but I reminded everybody we passed that 5 years ago in the House.
I was so interested in doing a little research and background on CON, and this guy and some others were, first out of the gate trying to figure out, wait a minute, how do we solve this?
Yeah. And so, I think that's a tremendous win. And Bill Hickson mentioned today at a press conference how in North Augusta they have announced a $20 million cancer unit from Augusta in North Augusta that's going to create 300 jobs. You look at the proliferation of ambulatory surgical centers and hospitals across the state, and that creates access to care.
Absolutely.
Because that's the problem with CON is it strangled access to care. You can talk about free market, you can talk about everything else, but to me it was access to care.
Especially in your rural districts
that's
in the
right.
state.
And you got plenty of healthcare facilities in Greenville, Charleston, Columbia, but in Sumter we got one.
Yep.
And there was nothing worse than seeing a CON restrict creating some services or an MRI or a PET scanner in our area because they had to go to fight for 3 years to get it from a CON. So that it was a huge win. School choice, we worked on that for a long, long time in this state. I can remember from the put parents in charge during the Sanford years and never got to the finish line. Got it to the finish line last year. In fact, the House even went so far as to expand universal school choice this year. So we did that. Open carry, Second Amendment protection. Nobody, we never got that anywhere near the finish line. And I'll never forget when I was talking to my chief of staff when I first got in there. He said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I really would like to get open carry to the finish line. I mean, I really think about it. And we were able to bridge the opposition from the law enforcement by working with them to prevent felons from having guns and coming up with creative solutions to bring them on board. And we now have open carry, 29th state, and that's something we ought to be very proud of. And lastly, the fentanyl crisis, and all the issues that we have, the catch and release on bond, and it was time for us to make a stand that realizing that criminals were not respecting our laws, and if you only can get so many chances, and then if you can't conform your behavior, I'm sorry, you got to go to prison for a long time. Yes. We'll give you an opportunity to get out at some point, but you cannot continue to terrorize the citizens of the state. And we cracked down on law enforcement last year. On crime last year, and I think we did a good job
with the bond reform.
With the bond reform, and with the fentanyl trafficking, we did today retail crime. We got that almost to the finish line in a conference committee. The smash and grab silliness that we see,
and not only that,
South Carolina, you're going to prison.
Not only that, in the budget, up in compensation for law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So I mean, all
2
across
years
the board.
in a row.
Yeah.
So, I think we've done some great things. You even go to help not harm. I hate that we have to get into issues, but, at some point, minors can't make decisions, and parents should not put them in harm's way for irreversible lifelong decisions, such as gender reassignment or hormones.
Tell that to big tech.
Yeah. I mean, and so we've done that. We passed that social media bill this year. We passed the porn bill today. There were some hiccups along the way. It got tense with some members, but the problem is members need to realize the last day of session, as we learned with the health care bill, one person can object, and people were coming up there objecting, and this is not the time to demand purity in my way or the highway, and you're going to have to make those decisions. So that's why I kept reminding everybody when they come up there, I don't like this, I don't like, well, you're going to have to either swallow it, or you're going to have to we have to let it die.
Hey, and a lot of gratitude for you, because, when we're standing at ease, we're all, hey, what are we doing later? And it is a beehive up around the speaker day. People are standing on that stool talking, and you could tell, you could look at Speaker Smith, and he's just like, hey, y'all figure, you good? You good? He's literally.
Well, you got to get him back there.
Yeah, he is trying to bang heads to get things done.
And we were able to get, the porn age verification to the finish line, and I know there were some good amendments put on there, but the problem is they weren't vetted in committee, and I wanted them to be in the bill, but I had members who said I ain't gonna allow it, and when that's gonna happen, do
you get 80% of the loaf or nothing?
And we can come back and do that next year. These are things but don't let the whole bill go down with the ship, and don't let any of that, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And that was what was surprising to me today, having to manage all that and getting people trying to drag me into, well, I'm right. I'm like, it's not who's right now. It is about how we get this to the finish line.
What can we get done today? Because, guys, 5 o'clock, it's over, so.
No, she doesn't like me on podcast. She's like, no to podcast.
I will say, many of my supporters are okay with me on a podcast, so long as there is editing. They're not okay with me on a live podcast.
Hey, that is a good point.
I gotta object. And a donkey song.
He said donkey song?
Yeah. Remember the bleep?
Sound.
Oh, the sound. Yeah. So I don't know if you listened to all of our podcasts, but episode 3.
Absolutely not. We have 2 listeners, man.
Yeah. I was so fired up. And I was so angry. This was during the Help Not Harm bill debate on the floor. And I felt like there were such disingenuous amendments put up. And not only that, the narrative that was put out there on social media. And then we had this swimmer that decided to give her input.
This swimmer, you mean Riley Gaines?
Riley Gaines. She said 63 rhino Republicans just voted not to punish doctors for castrating
the violent
our
misdemeanors.
children.
Violent.
Right, which I replied and said, I don't tell you how to swim, so do not come and tell me how to play politics in South Carolina.
and again,
that's where the donkey sound will come in.
That's right.
Cover that. That wasn't a compounded one, but I was so angry at that time, I was compounding cuss words, so we had to use a donkey sound instead of just the bleep.
But again, the world isn't static, right? It's dynamic. And this is literally in the middle of the debate of Help Not Harm, right?
Yeah.
And literally all these accusations are flying on social media. The funny thing is, you're the social media guy as far as staying in touch. I am not. That was literally the night that me and Adam Morgan, chair of the Freedom Caucus, were sitting in the cookie room. And he says,
we're snuggling.
And stop. Hey, it's spooning, okay?
He was trying to convince
spooning. And so literally him and I were just sitting there talking, and he said, man, I am so glad that the social media pressure made y'all come around and vote for the bill the right way.
Just wait 5 hours. The sun's going to come up, and you can take credit for that, too.
I literally was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And so he enlightened me to this whole Twitterverse stuff as it was going live, and I said, please stop.
And I'm sitting there, thumbs ablaze,
you really do not
fighting with them.
You don't take that seriously, right? You don't really think that Twitter made us vote the way we vote. And he goes, oh, yeah. And I was like, okay, done. Can't do it.
Wow.
So back to more serious stuff.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out what I was being criticized for last night. I'm looking at my Twitter. I can't read it. I don't have my glasses. I don't know where I left them.
Hey, man, I'm getting there, too.
So let me ask you this, though. So out of all the major things, during the budget, I like to tell people that everyone thinks that, you come down to Columbia, and Columbia changes you. and I've often heard, because whenever I come down here, I think one of the first things I told you was in York County, I always viewed politics as being there's three types of Republicans. You have a Gary Simrell, which was the first to kind of bring over the Republicans, and he was the bridge.
He left.
You know?
He turned into the biggest rhino according to his.
in York County.
Then you had the Tommy Pope, and then you had the Ralph Norman, which was more the I'm going to stand on this and never budge one bit. And I think one of the first things I said to you, and that was the bluntness, was, I viewed myself as more of the Ralph Norman Republican, but I wanted to be pragmatic. I wanted to get at things as far as I could. And I always equate it to football terms. I feel like our country has gone so far left because the Democrats have marched, say, 5 yards at a time since the late 70s, and Republicans have been too busy trying to chunk Hail Marys instead of just trying to take a win whenever they can take a win.
Yeah, blocking, tackling,
And so
moving the ball forward.
as I come in, that started changing my mindset a little bit. And as we are going through this, I mean, many of the people that I thought were the most righteous ended up being the biggest virtue signaling without virtue, if I can say that the right way. But it changed my view. I wouldn't say it changed me. I still have the same beliefs. But that fight is.
But both you and I
there.
came in thinking that,
Yeah.
Freedom Caucus was like probably some guys that we can join after the first.
Well, he doesn't want to talk about Freedom Caucus. He's
No.
a speaker for
No,
all.
I know. But you and I thought that we would man, those guys are like real dudes, like just like us.
Yeah.
But we came in and we saw.
All that took was the ARPA funds. Week one, and I don't know if you know this story or not, but week one, we had the ARPA funds come down. The First Amendment was no city member can profit off of any of these funds. I voted with it. Next amendment was no city member or family member. I voted with it. Third Amendment was no city member, family member,
Or known associate.
or any business that they are affiliated with. But I still voted with it. And then the Fourth Amendment was they added in that same language, or any non-associate. And I was like, I can't vote with that. So I hit no. And I walked to the back room, and I went up to Adam Morgan at the time, and I said, hey, what you just put up, you had me until you said any non-associate. I thought everything that you were saying was duplicitous because we already have these ethic laws in place. But I was sticking with you until that happened. And he said, we had to rush it. To me, that loses some credibility whenever you have to rush to begin with. And then I said, okay, but you submitted it. And he said, what isn't going to pass? And he walked off. That night, the Freedom Caucus, whoever runs their page, posted that these rhinos chose to pad the pockets of their friends, and that fired me up.
That's when you became the swamp. You didn't know?
No, at that point, I shut up. I didn't want to. I stayed quiet for about a year. The Riley Gaines post is what switched me.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, forget these guys.
Well,
I'm done with this.
So you take the ARPA funds was our first week.
Yeah.
And we were still trying to figure out where our desks were.
Right.
And so all of a sudden 9 amendments come up and we don't know what's coming, and so we're trying to figure out. We're legitimately trying to talk to Josiah and Rob because they're in the Freedom Caucus. They're around us. We're trying to understand where they're coming from.
Right beside of us.
and they're not giving us any answers.
Yeah.
Fast forward to what we were dealing with this citizenship stuff this past 2 weeks. It's the same game. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's disingenuous. Hey, squirrel, to mislead a voter or
It's
mislead.
not that. It's outright lying.
Well, I'm
like
being,
that.
I'm being.
You're being.
crazy.
Yeah. No.
I'm
I'm
extending
being. My problem is, if you disagree with me, I can accept that. Let's fight about it. Let's have that conversation.
Yeah, correct.
But if you're going to be a liar, like that, I can't stand. Two things I can't stand: being pretentious or being a liar. Don't be either one of them with me, and you're fine.
Yeah. So,
I'm sorry, we took the air out of the room from the speaker.
Yeah. Well,
we kinda
casual observer.
spun off.
he's seen it.
Yeah.
But that's us growing up, right? as legislators. That's us learning for ourselves that, hey, and like you said, it's about relationships.
But that's been the great thing about the podcast. Because all last year, we took an ass chewing constantly and just kind of shut up. Because all that narrative was going out there first. And I would say once that Riley Gaines situation happened, I immediately started posting pictures of the board and everything else to say, hey, this is what's happening. This is what's going to happen. This is how it's going to be. And then all of a sudden, all those posts stopped. They quit trying to twist the truth.
I tell you, when I came...
And it didn't start back until about a week and a half ago.
And literally, this was at a charity event, the bicycle thing for Williams and Fudge. Remember? When I told you, I was like, hey, I'm going to do a podcast. Thinking about do it with local media at the time.
Yeah.
And you want to join me? It's basically the modern day newsletter. This is sort of our way of communicating with voters. And so
we still think it would be better if someone like SCE TV followed us around and did like a show of what's going on. But
Speaker, can we do that? Can we get a live?
We just can't vote on anything to do with SCE TV from that point on.
There's a lot of people shaking their heads.
This guy can't vote on half the stuff because he owns so many daggone businesses.
Stop.
That he has to recuse himself.
Hey,
Well, that's just being careful, and there's nothing wrong with that. And,
That's right.
That's what we have to do over there. But, the only thing I would chime in is, I will tell y'all, of all this criticism that we get for things that we are doing wrong and we're ruining South Carolina, what's the most satisfying to me is when I look and see when they're asked, what have you done for South Carolina? And you know what they cite? The bills we passed,
yeah.
And really that we did, and these are bills that were tried to be obstructed, gotcha amendments placed on it. And, at the end of the day, it is, that when they always say emulation is the highest form of flattery. And so you have to remember that right there, because how did all these bills get passed with 17 people?
I haven't figured out how to convince my constituency that I made the sun come up yet.
Yeah, I mean, and so at the end of the day is I understand, and, I go back to my favorite quote, and Nicolette, my communications director's in here with us, and she knows I want to put it in every speech, is my Teddy Roosevelt quote. And, about the man in the arena. And that has hung on my wall in every office I've had since I've been in the General Assembly. And it's because, it's the person that's in the arena who knows the sweet victory of success, but also the agony and disappointment of defeat. And, at least at the end of the day, you say, I came in here and I tried my best and I took a risk. And those who fail while daring greatly. And that's what I always say. So I always tell people, if your job is to dare greatly, to take a risk, and to go out and try to get things accomplished. And and I think that's what we all try to do over there in the General Assembly. Is we may not always win, but we're at least ready to risk ourselves and our political careers to do what's best for South Carolina.
And unfortunately, with it being sine die, I think that there are many legislators that are feeling that agony of defeat because of the political game that gets played of refusing to have you're asking for unanimous consent and one person standing up and shutting things down.
Yeah.
Or just so they can say, this is what I did because my name was never on a bill to ever get passed.
Or just like the House, we had a priority of an energy bill.
Right.
And
to me, I mean, my most important thing is cyber crimes and stopping that. And during the AI, and I want to get to that before we wrap up too, during the AI and cyber committee, I asked the question, what is most important to these companies for us to be able to move forward? And whenever I ask that question, those companies say energy. Because without energy, we can't bring in data centers. We can't bring in these tech companies.
Right.
Because they will cause rolling blackouts. And if we can't bring in those companies, we can't bring in those professionals. And how are we supposed to lead the fight? Whereas we are leading on the policy side. And I really want to thank you for that, because with the AI and
that ad hoc committee,
and if we're looking at being the first standing committee we are leading the charge. We are learning more. I mean, whenever I came in and my background being advertising and tech, and I'm fighting for sextortion, not too many people. There was a few members that really understood what was going on, and now we're seeing what a major problem is with it.
Well, but speaking to that AI testimony that we heard about, I mean, power generation and power delivery. So we're talking about energy. That's essential to everything that we're doing here in the state, right? Not just, turning a light on at your house or your business. It's also about its jobs, its economic development, and data centers.
Life or death for
data
many of the
centers
elderly.
are not going away.
Data centers are going to continue, and whether you like it or not, now I understand they produce 7, 10 jobs, but those aren't the only data centers we get. Think about Blue Cross Blue Shield, who has a contract with the federal government that employs thousands of people. Well, you know what happens to managed claims and to process claims? You got to have a data center.
Yeah.
And so when people get up and wax poetically about how data centers are energy hogs and they're horrible, well, how do you function without data centers that create jobs? If you're a large employer, how are you going to have it without having a large data center?
Yep. I didn't realize this until the Senate was debating this and talking with Blue Cross Blue Shield, but they actually utilize data centers to process claims.
Right.
Well,
and a lot of the day-to-day processing that goes on is done by AI. And they utilize data centers.
Well, and I know I sound a little bit like a conspiracy theorist here, but I've brought it up many times and been confirmed within that ad hoc committee that I believe that we have had the Industrial Revolution, we've had the Internet Revolution, and for the past 30 years, we've done nothing to protect people online until the past couple of years. The next two big revolutions we have coming behind us are artificial intelligence and quantum computing, and the problem is they're coming at the same time, and I truly believe that will cause a crash in our economic system, and data will be viewed as currency. And to me, and I know data centers are not something that I really care a whole lot about, but what we are seeing is just as storage centers or a key man office, instead of having a dedicated data center, now you're starting to see these data centers pop up that's handling 5 to 10 different companies.
Yeah,
and
right.
Housing the
They're like
information.
subletting servers out.
Yeah,
Yep.
and that's bringing, because they have a responsibility on protecting that data, that's bringing in those professionals into our area that allow us to address these issues.
Well, not only that, they're paying property taxes and things like that our local governments help sustain those operations. So I know we got to wrap up here. Thank you, Speaker, for joining us. A little rapid fire. What are some big wins? I mean, did we get NIL through?
We got NIL through today.
Nice.
So
Awesome.
That got there, got through, and so we got a lot of things. Judicial Merit Selection Commission reform, that is in a committee, and I feel confident that we're going to get a bill from there.
Okay.
And I believe we're going to be able to get that through. We've got a number. We got the energy bill, as you mentioned, is in conference. I don't have a lot of hope that we'll get something, but the one thing that provides me some solace is the fact that the Senate's own little resolution that they had said they recognize we have a problem with generation and transmission in the state, and they got to address it. So, we'll get there. And so sometimes people walk out of here and say, we didn't do this, we didn't do that. Let's don't look at the failures. Let's look at the successes that we had this session.
Right.
And those failures, in my experiences, will eventually turn into passage here in the next few years. And y'all learned this in your short time. JMSC reform, was talked about when y'all first came in. The next year, it came through, and it takes time to build and get that issue. And we're going to have these wins, and we're going to continue to govern in South Carolina in a responsible manner and grow our state. And I'm proud. We got one of the fastest growing populations in the whole country right now. We have had so much investment and jobs created in our state. And I can tell you right now, from my involvement in economic development, is people are kicking tires in South Carolina all the time. And it's not the mega plants, it's not the Scouts, the BMWs, but it is the suppliers and what I call the sweet spot, of $300 to $500 million capital investment and 200 to 400 jobs, and I'll take those every day of the week.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for honoring us with being the first guest.
Yeah.
Now everyone else is going to fall short whenever we go down to Tom Hartnett's district or Don Chapman's district and bring them on. Y'all have got a high bar to reach up to.
And not only the podcast, thanks for your leadership this year in the 125th session. As freshmen, I know we've appreciated your leadership team, your chairs, and giving us sort of a goal to reach. And like I said, a lot of success this year, but more to come.
Yeah,
I feel like I've been successful, but I'll tell you, I finally felt like I've taken the next step up. And I think it was last week or the week before last, I came up and I explained what I wanted to do, and it was Patrick looked at me and said, "Congratulations, you're no longer a freshman."
Personal growth, baby.
Like that was the big step, and I was like, "Wow, didn't think about it that way."
And let me wrap up saying this: I'm honored to serve with you guys. Y'all are doing great work, and I see a lot of our colleagues out here: Don Chapman and Tom Hartnett, Mike Neese. I can't see others up.
A lot of them have
That's
started
Brandon
leaving.
Cox.
Brandon Cox out
Brandon
here.
had a big win today. Congratulations,
On the
Brandon.
Robert Small staff.
But
we're going to talk about that in the next segment.
Most importantly, I will say, I thank the University of South Carolina Brew Pub, Brew Lab.
Yes.
Thank you guys. Go Gamecocks, and you make a good damn beer.
Thank y'all for joining us.
Hats off to the fighters and the leaders. Here's to you, here's to me, here's to us being